Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. And I've got a lovely story for you tonight, so I hope you're ready to listen. And don't forget to go and get yourself a lovely drink. And you know the rules I always tell you. If I don't know what you're drinking, I'd love to know. And let me know what the weather is like in your part of the world, because I do love hearing from you. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I sit up with a start, rising from my bed covers, like a seal's black head, emerging above the ocean waves. I'm wiping away the beads of sweat that have gathered across my forehead with the back of my arm. The salty liquid is pouring down my back, trickling down my legs, like the raindrops on a window pane. And it's not even a hot night, nor am I going through the change of life. I'm only 35 years old, so this can't be the menopause. My body is trembling, and I know it's due to this interminable, dreadful dream that persistently haunts me, although the dream seems so benign, so innocuous, so unoffensive. For some cryptic, unfathomable reason, it provokes in me an unwarranted, irrational distress that I can't explain. My husband is rolled over comfortably on the side of the bed. He's fast asleep, blindly oblivious to the emotional turmoil I'm experiencing, as his light snores filter through the room. Our black and white Cheshire cat, Pluto, is lying curled up against my husband's stationary back, giving me a curious look through his yellow eyes, as if to say, "What's up with you?" I don't imagine he's surprised to see me sitting up again, as I've been making a habit of this behaviour of late. Pluto sagaciously never sleeps with me. He knows I'm far too restless for him, while my husband remains unflinching in his sleep, maintaining the same position as a stoic, moss-covered log lying across the forest floor. For a moment I cling to the bed covers. My unmoving eyes stare vacantly ahead of me as I adjust to the light. I try to assimilate the meaning of my dream and what it could mean, and why something so anodyne is causing me such a perplexing angst. The bedroom is bathed in the dark shadows of the night, so that all our furniture has become like obscure dense silhouettes, with a rude solid density that makes their forms and shapes appear almost obnoxiously sinister. But it doesn't faze me at all, as I know what each familiar dark form actually represents. There's a television set situated near the far end of the room, perched above a large television stand. To the left of the room is an elegant upholstered chair and a large glass coffee table, opulently framed in an elaborate wrought iron that serenades the large fireplace that we only ever use here in the winter, when it's bitingly cold, and the orange flames crackle away merrily in the hearth. At times like this, the room becomes like a cosy den. Pluto wisely refuses to leave his new perch on that chair, but tonight it's neither hot nor cold. It's a perfect, pleasing temperature, which you would expect in early spring. I climb out of bed, slipping into the ensuite bathroom, where I quickly fumble around with my fingers, trying to find the light switch. Finally, I find it, and I'm relieved when the light does come on, which is rather bright for my blary, rather sleepy eyes that are not yet used to the obtrusive brightness, so I keep them half open. My bladder now stings with fullness, and it needs emptying, and once I relieve myself, I dry my body down with a towel, realizing that my pyjamas are completely soaked from all my sweat. If I didn't know better, I would say I took a random dip in our swimming pool and returned to bed in my dripping clothes without bothering to change. I am tempted to wake up my husband, but then what's the point? I'll only be welcoming a repeat of Groundhog Day over and over again, although in this case it's Groundhog Night, as I tell him about my dream that I've told him 1,000 times before. He'll listen to me with a sombre seriousness, but he's unable to offer me much comfort, so what's the use of actually waking him up? "So you say you're dreaming about that abandoned house, further down the road from us,
The one that's been empty for about 4 years now. A long time. And this house is giving you nightmares? That makes no sense to me. How can an abandoned house you barely even know give you nightmares?
I don't know. I know it's irrational. I know it doesn't make any sense. But every time I dream of that house, it physically makes me recoil. It makes me squirm. I don't know what it is, but it's really, really intimidating.
That's very peculiar, says my husband. Shall I make you some warm milk and honey? Will that make you feel better? Ease away some of the stress?
Thanks. That will be kind, I'd said. I knew that exactly the same scenario would play out again if I woke my husband up now. There'd be warm milk and honey to sip in a lovely mug, followed by my husband's reassuring, soothing words. But none of that was working to ease the level of trepidation I was currently experiencing about that abandoned house that is niggling me so much, like an itch I want to desperately scratch. But worse still, an itch that I simply can't reach. The house had been owned by a family who'd moved to the countryside from New York to embrace a more relaxing, serene way of life. But it had got too much for them. I think they couldn't bear the peaceful tranquility and isolation of country life. It would seem they hankered after the vibrant buzz and throbbing heartbeat of the cosmopolitan city, the hip and happening coffee bars, the cheerful chatter of people, the marvellous shopping opportunities with inviting window displays to tempt your burning pockets, the drama from a plethora of theatres, and the sizzling nightlife, the drunken laughs and dancing people. One day this ambiguous family just up and left without a word to anyone, and the last I heard was they'd returned to New York City without even bothering to put the countryside property on the market. It seemed incredulous that they didn't even want to get the financial benefits from a sale, but I have learnt in life that some people are enigmatic to say the least, and that has to be true. A good friend of mine who lived in town, called Jackie Haynes, became acquainted with the Baxter family. She told me they had tirelessly groaned and moaned about how they hated living in the countryside, as there was nothing to do here, and the nightlife pretty much sucked. It would seem that a life in the countryside that had so eagerly seduced them with its attractive appeal, but the rosy allure had soon faded, dried up, crumbled away in their hands like a dried-up flower, and fallen apart. I gather they do that a lot in Russia. The young people abandon their houses in the countryside, move to the cities like St. Petersburg. It's possibly done here too, but not on the same grand scale found in Russia. I do understand that some city dwellers simply can't hack a life in the countryside, even if on the surface it initially was so seductive, seemed romantically alluring, so picturesque, so dreamy. Indeed, I know this because I was born and raised in New York myself, and I have friends who would find living my more solitary lifestyle completely insufferable, and have admitted as much to me. I, on the other hand, was born in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where there was a country girl inside me bursting and burning to come out and be fully expressed. When I met my husband Peter, who is a writer by profession, often writing scripts for plays and movies, it was the most obvious, unambiguous thing for us to do, to move to the countryside. For many writers need their space and privacy, a place where they can work in tranquil solitude, devoid of intrusive distractions, and surrounded by great beauty, which helps to spark their inspiration. So moving out here was a no-brainer for us. I'm not exactly sure why we ended up in Kentucky of all places, but we did, and in truth I really love it here. I think it was the charming, almost fairy tale-like quality of our farmhouse we moved into that literally sealed the deal for me. In truth, I'm a terrible romantic at heart, and our dreaming, wistful farmhouse was poetry in motion. It really was. It is a whimsical, enchanting place that I'd been dreaming about since I was a young girl, an unassuming, whitewashed, double-story symmetrical farmhouse, which may sound ordinary, but it isn't, and has so much in common and synchronicity with its classical English equivalent. Indeed, if you saw it parked on a village green in the English countryside, it would absolutely, unequivocally belong. It oozes charm and character, while roses tumble like laughter down the walls of the house, and the large French windows open out onto spectacular views of the viridescent countryside. scattered so generously with trees, while to the rear of the property you'll find that it's hugged cosily by an inviting wraparound porch that overlooks a silvery pond, surrounded by a couple of weeping willows with curvaceous branches, hefty crooked trunks, and feather boa-like leaves that skim the surface of the water so elegantly. We live not far from Augusta, known as one of the most picturesque towns in Kentucky, with notable landmarks like the Mammoth Cave, the Cumberland Gap, and Shaker Village. It is in Bracken County and is geographically located on the southern banks of the Ohio River. Suffice to say, I would drive past the sorrowful deserted house on my way to work every day. And over the last few years, it was becoming more and more desolate looking, almost as if it sensed it was neglected, underappreciated, and estranged. It was brewing in its own melancholia. I think the family had also ditched Pluto, our adopted, beloved Cheshire cat. Let's just say one day shortly after the family had vanished into the sunset, I saw Pluto running across the overgrown yard, diving into one of the dusty open windows of the abandoned old colonial home. I grew very concerned about Pluto's welfare. He didn't look like a feral cat, but he might just become that way, without any kind intervention. I remember, even though I was on my way to work at the time, where I worked for the local conjoined bookshop and coffee shop in town, I just had to stop. I was a passionate animal lover, and learning that the family had left the property unoccupied meant I naturally became solicitously apprehensive about their cat. I parked my car on the side of the road, dashing into the abandoned house. As the front door had been kicked down, the wooden panels appeared to have been shredded apart, and for a door so solid, it was curiously bizarre. I found the affectionate black Pluto, with white socks on his paws and a distinguished white moustache with a matching bib on the front of his chest, lying comfortably curled up in a ball on a fully made bed that was now covered in a thin layer of dust. My heart melted like butter for poor Pluto, who looked a little thin and emaciated, and his coat was a bit manky. He was full of fleas. I picked him up and brought him home with me, and fed him, and the rest, of course, is history. I was appalled that these people had dumped their own cat. By all accounts, they left the place fully furnished, and there was even mouldy food I noticed in the refrigerator, so it looked like they'd evacuated their home on an impulsive whim. In my mind's eye, I get the feeling that one day the head of the family just said, "I can't hack another day of listening to bird song and the wind whistling through the trees. Let's get the hell out of here, shall we? We need to get back to the bright, buzzing lights of the city. The honking taxi horns, the chattering people, the buzzy, vibey restaurants, to feel alive and vibrant again." That's what I personally believe actually happened. So getting back to the immediate moment, where I hear my husband's gentle snores, observe the rise and fall of his chest, I can see he's out for the count. He's fast asleep. I glance at the digital bedside clock, which registers 1 o'clock in the morning. I have a phenomenal idea. In hindsight, maybe it wasn't such a great idea after all. But the abandoned house, situated further down our road, that features so dramatically in all of my lucid nightmares, under the shadowy light of a full moon, appears to be speaking to me in my subconscious mind. It's calling my name in the sombre, foreboding stillness. Maybe the house itself wants to get my attention for some reason. I mean, stranger things have happened. Maybe if I went to visit the house right now, I could make sense of why it is featuring in my dream so explicitly. It's like I'm being nudged and asked to pay attention to that dream. There was no time like the present, so I thought. I cautiously amble over to my wardrobe and grab my tracksuit and trainers, along with my windbreaker, as it can get quite chilly out of doors. I'm thankful for my husband's ability to sleep through almost anything. A year ago, me and my husband were fortunate guests on a friend's yacht. Well, actually, not so fortunate, really. A wild, unbridled storm was brewing. A reckless lightning was striking viciously. It plundered the dark sky that night with jagged yellow flashes that pierced through the tumultuous ocean waves. The weather showed no mercy. Indeed, the whole yacht was shaking precariously, rocking backwards and forwards, while angry ocean waves were spraying the decks with a magnanimous amount of water. Everyone on board that yacht was terrified,
But not my husband. No, not him. He slept through the entire thing. Woke up the following morning asking us why we were wearing hangdog expressions, why we looked so haggard, as if our energy had been vacuumed out of us. It was a rough night, we told him last night. There were some hair-raising near-death moments. Really, said my husband, you do surprise me. I never felt a thing. I had a very good night's sleep, I might tell you. Boy, did I envy him for being able to sleep like that. I tiptoe onto the landing, my sneakers squeaking on the oakwood floors. I glide down the sweeping staircase, with Pluto padding close behind me. He knows if I'm up, there's the potential for a treat, and I don't disappoint. I dutifully oblige my cat and all his carnal cravings, while I open a cupboard in the kitchen to retrieve a can of tuna for him, which I place on a plate, and he vacuums it up hungrily. I give him a nod as I creep out of the kitchen door, closing it gently behind me, so the door clicks in its slot. I amble over to the paved driveway, to my car, a white Toyota Corolla. I'm greeted to a cool, biting wind that nips against my neck, punneling my long dark hair backwards with its feisty gusts. But I don't care. I need to do this for some reason. The moon is full tonight, just like it is in my dream. It bleaches the sky with a generous ethereal light that dances gracefully across the vegetation and the white walls of our home. I climb into my car, placing my torch on the opposite seat. I put on my safety belt, although why I do this I don't know, but you can't be too careful, can you? I start up the engine and burst down the driveway with an enthusiastic ebullience. If my husband could see me now, he'd probably be having kittens. But what he doesn't know won't actually hurt him. I'm driving down the lumpy road that once was asphalted, I have to say, but over the years it's been overgrown with grass and has become deflectively cracked and, of course, rather ruptured. Finally, I find myself outside the abandoned house that is nestled only 50 feet away from the road. Then I see it. My blood runs cold. There's an unfamiliar black minivan parked close to the abandoned building that I've never ever seen before, and for some reason its ambiguous presence causes my heckles to rise. What is it doing parked outside this abandoned building? I can see flickering lights through one of the windows of the house. Someone is there. I can hear a strange chanting sound. It's more than one person. It's coming from the house. My curiosity is arrested and aroused, but not in a good way. Something feels seriously off about this, and I feel a heaviness descend over me that makes me feel very guarded and very unnerved. Something is very wrong. I need to find out exactly what's going on. I'm not the kind of person that likes to be left wondering about something, as mysteries of any kind need to be solved. I decide to park my car in an inconspicuous, well-camouflaged location, concealed by a couple of trees. I climb out of it cautiously, closing the door behind me discreetly and quietly. I'm not remotely afraid. Maybe I should be. Indeed, fear has not played any role in my mind so far. It doesn't exist on the central stage of my focus. Well, not yet. All reticent, retiring and uncertain thoughts are snatched and discarded, cast aside like the cigarette butts on an ashtray. Instead, an inspirited, inquiring intrigue smoulders up in my mind. It crackles away happily like the merry fire in a hearth, growing stronger, more audacious in its plucky assertiveness. The intrepid adventurer within me, that I'm not well acquainted with, unflinchingly guides me, with a circumspect prudency and wary vigilance, through the trees that fringe the property on every side, like a tall border of verdant bushy hedges, with the exception of the front of the house, that overlooks the dusty, cracked, rather remote, sad road, which, like everything else tonight, is plundered in darkness, with a tidal wave of delicate diaphanous light. I am stealthily slinking surreptitiously through the trees. Their tall, voluptuous shapes soar up proudly into the twilight, in a tenebrous, disfigured, lumpy haze that is not clearly discernible. They rather remind me of black cardboard cutouts at this time of night. Their graceful boughs swagger as the wind whistles. It punnels furiously against my windbreaker.
I notice that there are no sounds tonight that I'm normally so familiar with. There are no crickets, nor are there frogs. There aren't any owl hoots or coyote calls. It's airily quiet, bodefully inauspicious, hauntingly spookish. I can't shake off the overwhelming feeling that I'm being watched. I glance around the woodland trees that rustle against the spirited windy assault, but there's no one there. But why do I feel as if I'm being watched? The spine-chilling feeling keeps clinging to me, like a sticky spider web that I just can't shake off. My cautious, carefully orchestrated movements are not accommodating. It's difficult to be quiet, for even with the greatest of effort, the leaf litter beneath the rubber soles of my shoes is announcing my presence to any woodland creature that might be around. But I know whatever is in that house making that strange chanting sound will never hear me. They're making too much noise themselves. I run over to the side of the house, and the chanting becomes louder and louder and louder. I slip through the half-open door. I must be mad, but I do. And I peer in at a scene that until now I thought only belonged in the movies. How wrong I was about that. I observe about 15 rather inconspicuous human figures. Their backs are thankfully turned away from me. I would hate for them to see me. They're wearing long, dark, loose hooded robes that conceal their faces and brush against their ankles. They're holding black candles in their hands that are flickering in the darkness. There's a masked man who's clearly leading the ceremony, and if he was to look up in my direction, he could possibly see me. But I'm reasonably satisfied that I'm clandestinely cloaked in the dark corner, and am unlikely to be observed. The man with the mask that looks like a long beak has raised up a silver goblet in his hands, and he's speaking out in words that I can't comprehend. Umani canifona duandino ganolesana shanta maganala. But one word I keep hearing over and over again is Hail Lucifer! Hail Lucifer! The people continue to chant, Umani canifoni duandino ganilosini, Hail Lucifer shanta maginola. I can't believe what is going on. I can't believe it. And there is a figure lying in the middle of the floor that appears to be wiggling. The one hooded figure is carrying an executioner's sword in his hand. I've never seen such a savage, brutal-looking knife that could hack off a human head in a second. Of course, that's what he's about to do, isn't he? He's about to perform a blood sacrifice. Oh, my God! Are they about to kill a human being? Whatever that thing is wiggling in the middle of the floor, it looks to be like a child. But I can't be sure. My blood is running cold. All of a sudden, a huge hand pushes past me, as if I'm blocking their access. Then I observe this massive 9-foot figure, who barges boldly into the ceremony and begins to throw the hooded figures around the room like 100 dices across the floor. The hooded figures begin to scream as they desperately try to escape. This imposing, lofty creature is roaring. His blazing yellow eyes glare like yellow traffic lights at these beings. The hooded figures begin to run. They dash out of the house, thrashing across the wooden floor as fast as their legs can possibly carry them, dropping their candles and cast iron holders onto the wooden floor. The next thing I hear is the black minivan starting up hurriedly, its doors slamming violently. It chokes and splutters in its eagerness to get away. It heaves as it gracelessly spins away at breakneck speed until all the hooded figures are gone. I'm left standing there, trembling like a blancmange jelly, unable to move or do anything. It's like I'm encased in a cocoon from which I can't escape. I do not feel fear, not even at this stage. I think I'm feeling disorientated and confused, as if someone has whacked me over the head so violently hard that I've almost lost sight of my bearings, for I'm trying to assimilate what has just transpired. It seems so incredibly surreal. The next thing I know is an overlong arm grabs me gently. I hear a voice in my head saying,
"Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. Please come with me."
The huge giant-like creature leads me towards the bundle in the floor. That's when I see the figure, about the size of a large Labrador dog, but it looks more like a mixed breed of some kind. The dog's front paws are tied behind its back. Its back legs are shackled. Its jaw is tied together with string. And this trembling poor dog is cowering with terror, as if resigned to its fate. The poor thing is so panic-stricken, I almost want to cry. On bended knees, I stroke his long fur lovingly. I try to calm him down. "It's all right, boy. It's all right. You're going to be fine. You're safe now. No one can hurt you." I know they tie dogs like this in the meat market in China, and it makes me sick to my stomach. They claim that a dog's terror and the increase in adrenaline makes the meat taste delicious. How can people be this sick, eating a man's best friend? For years I've posted up petitions to try and ban this dreadful practice in China, but to no avail. They seem hell-bent on indulging in a practice that is morally corrupt, and no one does a thing about it, when everyday dogs are being hacked to death in China like this. I look up at the very large creature, whom I haven't really observed properly. He had brought me over to see the dog. I realise he's a Bigfoot. I cannot believe what I'm beholding. I mean, are these creatures even real? They obviously are. Our eyes meet, and in this revelatory moment, I realise that his eyes are angelic, and that he's equally as mortified about what just transpired here, which is why he broke up the ceremony. I have no way to express to you the magnificence of this creature's eyes, but they were mirrors of his soul. Of that I'm in no doubt, revealing the undisguised goodness in his heart. There was such a noble quality to him, a distinguished regal-looking human face, that made me think of an Indian chief wearing a full headdress of eagle's feathers. He possessed such a masculine face with high, distinguished cheekbones, a heavy, square jawline, a pronounced forehead, and a hooded but deep-set pair of eyes. This majestic Bigfoot, or hairy man, is impressively big, hefty, burly, in all his generous proportions, but is also graceful in his agility and poise. His hair is long and flowing, the colour of grey ash, and he certainly does not smell. Let's just say if the Bigfoot had not intervened in time and thrown those hooded figures around so violently, like clothes on a heavily soiled cycle in a washing machine, and scared them off with such success, this poor dog that I'm looking at now would have become a sacrifice. There are melted black candles on the floor everywhere, with their distorted wicks and congealed wax dribbled all over, splashed across the wood like a David Hockney painting. The candles have been expeditiously abandoned by the terrified hooded figures in their anguished haste to escape the screaming, incandescent Bigfoot. I'm quite certain they thought they were going to be eaten by the creature, as the Bigfoot deliberately scared them half to death. The man with the executioner's knife had been waving it around at the Bigfoot, whom was undaunted by the deadly weapon. I can't help wondering if they thought the Bigfoot was a demon that they had conjured up from one of their inauspicious chants. I hope they think twice about worshipping Lucifer again. I'm sure they will. There are the remnants of dropped candles lying on the floor, now contorted, deformed, misshapen and bent, flickering in the light, melting into voluptuous twisted heaps like the stalagmites in a cave, while the full moon has cast its ethereal shadows around the room. I see a pentagram carved in the wooden floor, bloodstains that have saturated the floorboards, staining them in dried puddles of scarlet, that poignantly speak of the indelible sacrifices that have not been so lucky to escape the executioner's sword, that have been surrendered to Lucifer as a sacrificial offering. There's a plethora of cold, hardened black candle wax everywhere that has been left here from previous rituals, which I think has been taking place for quite some time, or since the house became unoccupied. There's angry graffiti painted over the walls in bright primary colours, with upside-down crosses and words that read, "Praise Lucifer, the light-bearer, the beautiful one." The Bigfoot tugs off the strings that have held the dog captive to his fate. The dog is unable to believe he's been set free from his restraints. He cowers in the corner and then tries to frantically run away. I dash after him, cradling him gently in my arms. "You must keep him.
I hear the Bigfoot saying in my head. He needs your kindness to heal from his trauma. They will not be back, but they have unleashed darkness into this space. I nod and say, you will help me take him to my car. I'm going to adopt him. I'm taking him home with me. I know the Bigfoot understands what I've said, as he's read my mind. So he picks up the dog in his arms and carries him to my car, putting him in the front seat next to me. The Bigfoot nods at me. He watches me drive away into the night, with my furry companion at my side. I wave at the Bigfoot, and then he's gone. Let's just say it took a week for my dog Casper to recover from the events of that dreadful, inauspicious night. Believe me, my dog knew he'd been spared from certain death. Animals are clever, they know things. He was so grateful to be alive, and soon became so affectionate, regaining his trust in human beings. I honestly don't know how he could. If you think that is the end of my story, you would be very wrong. By all accounts, my husband was not at all happy that I got up at 1 o'clock in the morning to visit an abandoned house that appeared to be calling me in my dreams. But for some reason, I was meant to visit that house, as all my nightmares stopped after I visited the place. Ostensibly beyond the ugly scene, I had the misfortune to witness where those hooded figures were worshipping Lucifer. It wasn't all bad, as not only did I have a chance encounter with a Bigfoot, but I became the owner of a remarkable dog. I am absolutely certain that the Bigfoot I encountered knew exactly what these devil worshippers were toying with. In my opinion, he has a great understanding of the spirit world, and was trying to put a stop to this grievous evil that was being welcomed and conjured up into our realm by these hooded figures. He terrorized them to scare them away from their foolish practices, and in my opinion, they shan't be worshipping Lucifer in a hurry after that dreadful scare. If I were wearing their shoes, I certainly wouldn't. What do they say? Once burnt, twice shy. So this is the end of part 1 of our story, because as she says, this isn't the end of the story yet. So tune in tomorrow night to hear the rest of it. Until next time, goodbye and good night.